Hey everyone, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'll be explaining how batteries work. Now this is simple, simplistic if you even. This is only describing based off of what I've been doing for the past 5 years. I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional, but I'm not a dimwit either. So don't take it with a grain of salt, but don't expect it to work exactly how I say it does. As always, wear eye protection, gloves, and a coat. Most importantly, this contains hazardous materials such as mentions of lead, sulfuric acid, and charge with electricity, which can kill you if you are not competent. You do not know how to handle electricity, and you do not know how to handle toxic metals and chemicals. Always assume this. Even if you are in a lab, you always assume this. This is why we wear protection. Let's get straight into the video. We will first be describing arguably the first battery ever invented, the voltaic pile. This is a simplistic demonstration, but it was originally made with zinc, copper, and nickel. Now, voltaic used saltwater soaked cloth or silk as cardboard here. As always, this is the Wikipedia on his. This is the specifics I'm referring to whenever they were which they used. It was either copper or silver, not copper and nickel, which most commonly is referred to that as many of the videos I've been able to find. And zinc, they were disc, not plates. That's another misconception that a lot of people have. I probably also mentioned this, which is a error. And they were separated by cloth or cardboard silk brine. So the claim that it was silk is also probably misinterpreted, as they probably didn't think that cardboard was really a thing back then, which it was. It just wasn't as cardboard today. But this is essentially the bare bones you can get in. So essentially, what he discovered, when you put two different types of metals in a solution that is conductive, at the time they didn't know that, it generates a charge. Your copper is your positive, your zinc is your negative, and your saltwater soaked cardboard is the electrolyte bath of which it exchanges ions. This is not the same as electrons, because ions is shared between zinc and copper within the same solution, whereas electrons has to take an alternative path, which completes the circuit. This is why batteries can discharge despite not being connected. A simpler example would be put it into a small glass cup or jar, put a zinc nail and a copper wire in a saltwater solution. Now your zinc will always inherently be a negative metal because your zinc has electrons it wants to give away. Copper, on the other hand, always prefers to take. So, when we refer to negative and positive, we're referring to one wants to lose that amount while the other one wants to gain that amount. Again, this is a simplistic definition. Do not take this as absolute truth. One of the things we can swap out that also acts as a positive is graphite. Graphite is weird in this example because it is not inherently positive or negative, it's actually neutral. However, when exposed to another material that is vastly either positive or negative, graphite, or carbon in this instance, will always want to assume the opposite role. So, for example, this is our zinc nail, this is our graphite rod, or something you can get from pencils. Graphite in this example will always assume the role of a positive metal because it wants to take inherently what the zinc wants to give out, because zinc is so different, it wants to give away so much compared to graphite. Graphite has to assume the role of positive. This example is not carried on to our lead-acid battery, but we'll get to that in a second. Relatively speaking, a battery is in like the simplistic definition you can ever give it, a battery is just a simple device that generates electron flow via the use of a chemical reaction. Yes, this is a chemical reaction. Not the same as your vinegar and baking soda, which is arguably cooler, but still, it is a reaction because of the inherent reaction with a solution with a material that we can make a difference in using it for something else. One of the things you always assume with a battery is that you can never recharge it. You always assume this unless you are the battery manufacturer. One thing you can do, and one thing you absolutely do have to worry about, is whenever you want to recharge a battery, all you are doing is returning the ions to the previous state. It's not taking the electrons. The electrons are just doing the work of depositing the ions back to a previous state. So, what about our zinc and copper battery? What voltage does it produce? Well, as I've personally been experimenting with them, about 0.50 to 0.80 volts. You can get this a little bit higher to 0.90 if you instead swap out the salt water for vinegar and salt, although you probably will have to boil the vinegar or at least warm it up for the salt to properly deposit in the vinegar, but still. This is before charging. After charging, this is non-rechargeable, but this is an experiment you can do, is whenever you check a charge through it, which just simply means something that has a greater electron count than your current, will always want to equalize. If you hook up a 9-volt battery to a regular battery, over time, if you let it go on long enough, that regular battery will explode. The thing about battery charging is, specifically in this case, whenever you deposit a larger amount of what we call an electron pool, which simply means that this, like if you were to have it in like a pool, a 9-volt battery to something like this would be the equivalent of pouring a beach ball sized bucket of water and trying to force it into a gas tank. It's not impossible, but you will have significant loss. This is inherently because of 3 reasons. Energy distance, the inherent use of the metal with the solution, i.e. internal resistance, well 4 I should say, and lastly, gas production. We all know whenever you have 2 different materials in an electrolyte solution that you check a higher charge, it will create oxygen on the positive and hydrogen on the negative. These bubbles do absolutely affect the way your battery charges. And if you do not have it properly vented, it can cause a serious issue. Mainly because of that called bromine gas. You can minimize this by not overcharging it, but it will still be created regardless. This is why lead acid batteries are best stayed outside, because they are vented for this exact reason. How does this tie in with our lead acid? Well, 2 main reasons. Lead acid, both plates are lead. And remember how I said at the start, it has to have a difference in material. This is why our graphite and zinc work, well, because one is inherently more negative than the other, but how does this work with lead? It actually doesn't have anything to do with lead, instead the solution and charge. You see, whenever we can use that effect of the negative does not produce oxygen and the positive does, we can use that to our advantage because lead does like to oxidize. And oxidized lead is not the same thing whenever it comes to an ion flow as the same thing as normal lead. But lead doesn't oxidize with hydrogen, it only oxidizes when oxygen is present in a corrosive substance, such as sulfuric acid. So, your lead acid battery is entirely dependent based off of which way you charge it. And when you initially charge it that way, you cannot revert it back unless you physically swap out the positive plates and the sulfuric acid. Now, whenever it comes to a battery, your surface area, or your total available area that your ions can flow, is just as important as the difference in material. or in this instance, as the difference, you can get your oxidization state on your positive, or in this instance, your anode. One thing to note about doing any experiments like this is always make sure you never go past 5 volts. Never. Now, you don't have to do this with lead and sulfuric acid. You can do this with zinc and vinegar, which, albeit will give you less results, it will be less sustainable, but it actually does work. Now, there are many different ways to wire a battery as well. You can either hook them up parallel, such as the example I'm making right here, which just simply means negative to negative and positive to positive. One thing we will have to do is we will daisy chain these. This simply refers to the fact of your negative, your positive on one battery will go to the negative of another. And then you will take the positive from your first battery and the negative, or you'll take the negative of your first battery and your positive of your second one, and you will assume that to be so. And remember, per one of these, this is 0.80 volts with an average of 0.25 per one cell. Now we know daisy chaining is positive to negative, positive to negative. We know parallel is negative to negative, positive to positive. Your parallel will always be more amps, same volts. Your daisy chain will always be more volts, but less amps. So you can pause the video right here to, of course, make that calculation, if so, and actually comment down what you think this 9-cell cluster will give you. As always, have a good one, and if you want me to do more of these videos, you can always check down in the comments and say, hey, do this video next. I'll put up a poll on my channel for the most comments I get on this video. In the meanwhile, have a good day, and wear protection, wear goggles, gloves, lab coats, do this outside, and do not assume you know what you are doing without consulting a professional. As always, see you later and have a good one.